Okay, so the 4-chord position is going to be this D7 F sharp chord, and it will sound like this. Relatively straightforward. It's something that I covered in great detail in the Me and the Devil Blues video, which I just released. So you're transitioning from this, I got a kind-hearted woman, what we learned in the previous segment, do anything this world for me. So he plays that. He's gonna sit on this dead thumb for 3 strikes. 1, 2, 3 before he goes into this next chord. So he goes 1, 2, 3, and then when he jumps into this next D7 chord, he actually starts by playing 3 notes on the top string. You're going to start with the top string open, then go to the 1st fret top string, then go to the 2nd fret top string. 1, 2, 3. And after he plays that sequence, he fingers this D7 F sharp chord, which is actually going to be played like a double stop. So you're going to play your middle finger is going to play this 2nd fret top string, this F sharp, which you would have in E standard tuning. Obviously here it becomes a G in this tuning, but let's think about it in that terms. And then your index finger is going to play the 1st fret 2nd string, and your ring finger is going to play the 3rd string on the 2nd fret. So that's that D7 chord, and except that he plays it as a double stop. So your index and middle finger are going to play that 2nd and 3rd strings, and your thumb is going to play the top string as a dead thumb. It's imperative that that top string is played in the dead thumb manner. So it's a really chunky kind of chord because you cannot roll it out. You cannot play it like this. You have to play it in this dirty Delta blues rugged sound. This is like quintessential Delta blues muddy style, you know. I love the way that it manifests in this music. So you play this double stop based on this lead up, and you play this a series of 6 times, this chord, and it will go like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That a series of 2 times. You lead into it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then when he plays that sequence again, he plays the top string open, then the 2nd fret top string, 2 notes before he leads into it again. So from the beginning it's 1, 2, 3. What I'm doing in injecting it right there in between the chord strums. I got a kind-hearted woman, do anything this world for me. I got a kind-hearted mama, do anything this world for me. That's the way you would sing it out. So he resolves when he says do anything in this world for me, and the portion where he sings me, he goes into this little A chord to cap that off. So he plays that, and then in the after that 4 position, he actually goes back to that 1 chord slot. And immediately after he plays that chord, do anything this world for me. goes into this A7 chord again, followed by this 5-note strum on the dead thumb. Back to this riff again. That 8-note swing. That's the next part that follows. It's laid out for you in the tablature. Alright, so in the next sequence, we're going to look at the 5-chord position stance. And all that is a series of 7 notes. You are going to play, it's this part where he goes, but these evil-hearted women can't stand to leave me be. We're going to look at that part. That's the end of the stanza. It's going from the 5 position to the 4 position, back to the 1 position. And that E7 chord here is played like this. You're going to take your index finger, you're going to finger the 2nd fret 5th string, okay, and you're going to apply the dead thumb technique, this time on the top string, and you're just going to play the top string with the dead thumb. You won't even play the 5th string really, but your finger is going to be positioned there, and you're going to produce this this chord. And it's really chunky sounding, but it's built into the bass accompaniment. So much of the fabric of the song is carried by this dead thumb application. So you're going to play this position, the 5 position, the top string open with the dead thumb 7 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then you're going to go into that 4 position, that D7 F sharp chord, leading into this 3-note combo on the top string again. You're going to play that D7 chord, 6 strums, and then you're going to play this kind of lick at the end of that D7 chord, which is going to sound like this. It's 3 notes. You're going to go to the 1st fret 2nd string, play that pull off, play the 2nd string open, and then play the 3rd string open, ending on the A natural chord. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that sequence plays like this. But these evil-hearted women, man, they will not let me be. Man, they will not let me be. So that's that sequence. Then he goes back to what we learned in the introduction. Before he goes into the next stanza. So that's the main difference between Me and the Devil Blues and this song, is how much attention Robert Johnson is putting on this A7 and A diminished 7th chords here on the 4th, 5th, and 6th fret. That's the main staple of it. So next we're going to go to the next verse, which actually is going to be on the diminished chords, which with what we learned in Me and the Devil Blues. Alright, so the next verse will actually sound like this. I love my baby. My baby don't love me. Alright, so again, it's taking what we learned from the diminished chords in the introduction. He just plays a series of 2 chords, and here, to kick off that stanza, he goes and starts off on the C diminished chord on the 7th and 8th fret, and he slides over into the 8th and 9th fret to play that C sharp diminished chord. So that first sequence is 1, 2, dead thumb. I love my baby. And then again, my baby don't love me. So you play that 3 times, the same exact sequence. And then to cap that off, he actually plays a back and forth between the same chords. He's just going all over the place back and forth here. So he kicks off, he jumps into the C sharp diminished here, and he's on there for about 8 strums. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Back to the C diminished chord on the 7th and 8th fret. So you could play this relatively loosely. That's what he's doing, is just going back and forth. He sits here on the 8th and 9th fret for 8 strums, then back to the C diminished chord for 3 strums, back to the C sharp, C, C sharp. And that's all that is. And you're maintaining the thumb. Try to play that with the thumb. That thumb should always be accompanying you, pulsating that and dictating the rhythm of the song. If you don't have that in conjunction, it's not going to sound as great. And so, continuing on, he then goes into the D7 chord. I love my baby, woo, my baby don't love me. Then back to this sequence. Playing that 8-note swing. Then back to this. I really love that woman. Can't stand to leave her be. And then he goes into that sequence again. So that's something that we covered in the previous stanza. So there's really no need to sit on that. So let's go ahead and we can proceed to the next. The third stanza this time is played a little bit differently. Now, this is a very nice part of the song, very neat. It also appears in Phonograph Blues, is where he really goes back and forth between the A diminished 7th chord and the A7 chord. And here he's kind of telling his little story where he goes, ain't but the one thing to make Mr. Johnson drink. I could swear by the way that you treat me, I began to think. And that's really all he's doing, is going back and forth. But this time, for this A diminished 7th chord, normally you would have the bottom string 5th fret being fingered. Well, he leaves that off. So he goes back and forth between the chords. So that sequence here will sound like this. You start with that A diminished 7th chord, and it'll start like this. Ain't but the one thing. Those 2 chords kick in like that. Now ain't but the one thing, while playing this dead thumb immediately after that chord progression. 5 strums of that. Ain't but the one thing to make Mr. Johnson drink. Then he strums backwards. He's playing the same sequence, this time in reverse. To make Mr. Johnson drink, I could swear by the way that you treat me, I began to think. So, so again he goes, I'm getting the lyrics wrong, but that third sequence he goes, I was worried by the way that you treat me, I began to think. So at the end there is more of a pause between the chord strums. So initially we have these chords in quick succession, but at the end of those measures, there's a brief pause in between. So in the portion where he goes, you treat me, I began to think. So from the beginning, that concept will, from the absolute beginning, will sound like this. I'll go really slow, and it goes, ain't but the one thing to make Mr. Johnson drink. I could tell by the way that you treat me, I began to think. Very simple and laid out. Now the next portion is going to be very difficult. This is the solo in the song, these bending of strings on the 5th and 7th fret. And this is where he starts singing his high falsetto. And it'll sound like this. Oh babe, my love don't seem the same. So immediately after you play this sequence, I began to think. And after he plays that last chord, he goes and with your index finger, you're going to be plucking out these individual notes on the 5th string. So you'll find the 5th string 2nd string. You're going to play that twice. Then you're going to find the 7th fret 3rd string and you're going to play that note twice with the index finger. Then you'll jump to the 5th fret 3rd string, and you're going to sit on there and bend for a while. You're going to be bending the strings considerably upwardly in this stance. So those first 5 notes will sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the final 2 notes, 6 and 7, will be on the 5th fret bottom string. And altogether sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, babe. Oh, babe. Oh, babe. And then he plays that sequence again with a quick brush on the 5th string dead thumb. Oh, babe. And then he goes, my love don't seem the same. You're bending all of those strings. So immediately after he plays that, he goes into this A7 chord, followed by that 8-note swing. Then he goes into that D7 chord, he goes into the 5 position, the E chord. You break my heart when you call Mr. So-and-so's name. So, this part when he's singing, you break my heart, he's still singing in the high falsetto. And then a little part of that D7th chord, he's still in that high falsetto. When you call! And then the portion where he goes, Mr. So-and-so's name, he stops the falsetto and sings back to the regular voicing. And then it's followed by the introduction. Alright, so that's that portion. And then the next stanza, he actually solos, and he's just doing it all on that diminished chord. So the solo sounds like this. Or I gotta play that again. Alright, and that's the solo is gonna be a little bit more complicated here. He's not really necessarily sitting on these diminished chords. So that first sequence, if you have the tablature with you, he kicks off that next stanza, the solo, by playing this C and C sharp diminished combo. So you're on the 7th and 8th fret going into the 8th and 9th fret. 1, 2 is where he kicks off that solo. And then the next sequence will sound like this. It will sound like this. It's a little bit differently. He's skipping some spots. So that next sequence is he starts on that C diminished chord, goes into that C sharp diminished, then he jumps up to the B diminished chord, 6th, 7th frets, and then going to an A diminished. An A diminished chord is maintaining that, but you're on the 4th and 5th fret. So slowly we'll pick that apart very slowly here. So in that sequence, you start off on the C diminished chord on the 7th and 8th fret, 1, then you go into the 8th and 9th fret, then you play the 2nd string and then the bottom string, maintaining that C sharp diminished chord. So together it's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you jump up to the 6th and 7th fret, play that B diminished twice before jumping to that A diminished chord on the 4th and 5th fret, maintaining that same fingering. And you play that twice. So in all it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So he's jumping on those diminished chords. Plays that bass, and then the final sequence is he really sits on that C sharp diminished chord for about 8 strums. And that will sound like this. Before ending on this. So in leading up to that, he starts on this C diminished on the 7th and 8th fret before jumping into this this C sharp diminished chord. He sits on there for, I don't know, 8 strums. And then he plays a series of double stops after he jumps off that C sharp diminished chord. He goes into the B diminished chord. You hold it like this, but you play that. You play 2 notes here. You play the bottom string and then the 2nd string, and after that you'll play a double stop on the 3rd and 1st strings, maintaining this chording. So in all that sequence is like this, with the B diminished chord being played, the 6th and 7th fret here, it's 1, 2, 3. The double stop. Then he goes into the A diminished chord, and you're going to play the double stops on the 1st and 3rd strings. Twice. So that at the beginning of that measure, here it will be played like this. So it's, you start on the B diminished, 1, and then the next 8 notes sit on the C sharp diminished. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then you go to the B diminished chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the cap off of that solo. So that is played in that sequence, and then you go back to that D chord progression again. You sit in there, and then you go back to these chords again. Back to that 8-note swing. Then back to that E, the 5 position chord, much like what we've learned. Back to that introduction. So the solo portion of the song, he doesn't sing. But after he plays what we just taught, he maintains the same chordings across the rest of that stanza. So, we're going to cap off there, and so those are all of the first 4 stanzas of Kind-Hearted Woman. Each stanza is a little bit different from the next one. So what I've covered here allows you to understand what he's doing for each. Now, learning this song, try to play phonograph blues because they're built much the same way. So that's Kind-Hearted Woman in a nutshell. It's a little bit more of a building off of what you learned in Me and the Devil Blues. So it's like one step up more in complexity. So I feel that I've covered everything that I need to for this song, and it's a good way to get yourself acclimated with the dead thumb technique strategies of Robert Johnson's playing. It's so much of a staple in Delta blues music. And you're also learning about diminished chords or complicated jazz chords. I mean, Robert Johnson was so immersed in early jazz music, so influenced by Lonnie Johnson. So you have these interesting diminished chords, and they also appear in his stuff in D major, Drunken Hearted Man Blues, Malted Milk Blues, again using these diminished chords. That's why I love his music so much. So that is it for this lesson for Kind-Hearted Woman. Again, I highly recommend that you look at the ebook that goes along with this lesson. The ebook has all of the tablature laid out in such an easy to understand format. I have the actual chord diagrams for all of the chords that I've been talking about. So you can just look at it right there and maintain your fingering, so forth. I have also all the lyrics. So definitely check out this ebook. To me, it's the greatest book that I have written, the most detailed, clearest way in learning Robert Johnson's music. So if you haven't already, definitely subscribe to me on YouTube. Follow our Facebook page, Delta Lou Music. That's provided in the links in the information settings. And just join our blues community, a grassroots movement in preserving this music. I've done a lot of updates to my website. There's a lot more free content. I also have the beginning finger-picking blues style guitar tablature free. I'm updating a lot of my legacy stuff, a lot of my legacy videos moving forward. So this winter it's going to be all about Robert Johnson. I'm in the works for Volume 2. It's going to be another 10 songs of his other famous pieces. Robert Johnson's music is more of a comprehensive guide or a body of work across the whole Delta blues musical genre. He was proficient in all tunings, standard, vestibule, open G, elements of Son House, Charlie Patton are in his music, Skip James. That's why it's imperative to learn Robert Johnson's music in and out so that you can study and veer off and focus on other artists. So he put it all together. What a great, important artist in musical history. And also, if you haven't, take your pilgrimage to the Mississippi Delta. Do it. My people from around the world, you're watching overseas, come to Mississippi. See it for yourself. It was the most spiritual moment of my life, was going to the Crossroads. Unbelievable. What a moment. So I'm Delta Lou. I'm signing off, and thanks for keeping my mission alive. Thank you.